this, and I know David Kinder has joined us and his 13,000 financial planning advisors. What would you tell your clients to do if in the next 6 years there is a very diminished Social Security? But we're going to start with the Honorable David M. Walker, since it's his show, the former Comptroller General of the United States, and then we'll get to our advisors in the United States and around the world. As they say, and Mr. Wonderful says on Shark Tank, what are you going to do, or what are you going to tell your clients within 6 years if Congress doesn't do anything, and they're good at not doing anything? Social Security collapses right in front of your face. What are you going to do? David.
Nick, good to be with you. Congratulations on Spain's win. I know you're a U.S. citizen. Hopefully you were rooting for the U.S., but we didn't make it, and at least Spain won, which is where you live. Let me provide some background, and then we can get into the details. And let me say I can stay for at least 30 minutes, but I've got other things I have to do. I'm finalizing my book on saving Social Security in America, which I've got to get back to the publisher today. In any event, first, let's keep in mind that in the United States, there was a so-called three-legged stool concept for retirement income security. The base or foundation was intended to be the Social Security program, which is a social insurance program with three dimensions: retirement income, survivors income, and disability income. It's an insurance program. It's not just a retirement program, and it's a pay-as-you-go system largely. So one generations today are paying benefits today to people who are retired, and obviously demographics were a major challenge. But Social Security is a defined benefit program. You know how much you're going to get for the balance of your life, however long you live, if you live to at least the eligibility age, and it's also indexed to inflation. The second leg of the stool was employer-sponsored retirement programs. For many years, they used to be defined benefit programs as well, but now they are the rare exception to the rule. Most employer-sponsored programs are so-called defined contribution programs, where individual saves, typically employers will match. The amounts are invested. The individual bears the risk of volatility and market declines, and you get what you get. Start drawing on it when you reach retirement age. And the third leg is supposed to be supplemental retirement savings on top of that. It was never intended for Social Security to be the sole form of retirement income. It really wasn't intended for it to be the primary source of retirement income. But today, over 50% of Americans retire on Social Security as the sole or primary source of their retirement income. Defined benefit plans have declined significantly. I used to run the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, which insures defined benefit pension plans. Defined contribution plans are not insured, by the government, and they are the predominant type of plan. With regard to Social Security, I feel very strongly as a former trustee of Social Security and Medicare that it will not be allowed to fail, that we will not see the 22 to 28% across the board cuts in 2032, which is the latest prediction by the Social Security trustees and the Congressional Budget Office, but that Congress will either hopefully preemptively within the next couple of years reform the program, or they'll do something when they get within a few months of the trust fund going insolvent. But they won't allow that type of dramatic cut across the board. It's inequitable, it's irresponsible, it's politically infeasible. It also, if you allow that to happen, would result in a 1 to 2% reduction in GDP in each state, depending upon facts and circumstances regarding the demographics in that state. So it wouldn't be acceptable from an economic standpoint as well. There are issues that we have to talk about with regard to retirement savings, because our savings rate is too low. While most people who are employed on a full-time basis have an employer-sponsored plan. Not all do. And people who are working on a part-time basis typically don't have a plan. And so as a result, we need to figure out what are we going to do to get our savings rate up. And in my view, part of Social Security reform this next time should be a supplemental savings account, individual account type format for people that don't have access to an employer-sponsored pension plan. In addition, one other thing I'll mention before we go to our panel is I've got increasing concerns about insurance companies. My personal view is if you're in a defined contribution plan, you ought to be required to provide annuity options when the person reaches eligibility for retirement and wants to start drawing their benefits. But all insurance companies aren't the same. And my experience has been the rating agencies do not do a very good job of evaluating insurance companies because their horizon is typically 5 to 7 years. Can they meet their obligation for 5 to 7 years? And obviously, if you have a retirement annuity and you retire in your 60s, you're hopefully going to be drawing benefits a lot longer than 5 to 7 years. In addition, there's been trends of private equity getting involved in the insurance business. There's a lot of offshore activities going on. There's a lot of intergovernmental activity within one control group going on. And so my view is that there has to be a lot more scrutiny with regard to the security and stability of insurance companies who are providing annuities for retirement plans. Those are just a few things off the top of my head. Happy to hear from others and stay with you at least for a little while.
Okay, we're going to go to Jeff Brown first because he's pretty close to the situation of Social Security and see what he has to say regarding the Social Security. Are we going to have problems here? And how should advisors talk to their clients about it, since we have about 13,000 advisors listening to this show? What do you tell your clients? Should you ignore this? Should you save more? What should people do? What are your thoughts, Jeff Brown?
Yeah, well, thanks, Nick, and thanks, David. And I agree with so much of what David had to say. He covered a lot of ground there. Look, from the perspective of an individual and or an advisor who's working with individuals, I think it's first important to correct some of the misinformation that's out there. David did some of this already. Social Security is not going to go away. The question is, what's going to happen to the level of benefits? And even if Congress doesn't do anything else, the benefit cut would be substantial. It would be 22%, which I also agree is, that's not going to persist, even if it happens for a short period of time, because it would be the wrong thing to do to retirees, the wrong thing to do for the economy. And I don't think most politicians are going to allow that to happen. But even in that worst case scenario, most clients would still get 80% roughly of what they've been promised. So it's not going away. As far as what should we be doing about it, obviously, as David said, people need to be saving more. And I am a big advocate. I mean, I've done a lot of research in my life about the importance of guaranteed lifetime income as part of people's retirement portfolio. I think and this is what my book that's coming out next May called Will My Money Last is all about, which is we've kind of designed a system in the United States over the last 4 decades in which we've convinced people that the path to a secure retirement is just to build a big pile of wealth. Well, that's step one. But the much harder problem comes when you reach retirement and you now no longer have income coming in except possibly from Social Security. And you're used to living out of a paycheck. We know how to budget out of a paycheck. And now you've got this lump sum. If you're fortunate, you've accumulated in your 403B or your 401k plan, but you don't know how long you're going to live. You don't know how long you've got to make that money last for. And so I'm a believer that level of guaranteed income is very important. Social Security plays that role. The old defined benefit pension plans played that role. Unfortunately, we've not really designed our defined contribution 401k system to do that particularly well. Now, things are changing. There are a lot of discussions underway about how we can promote annuitization inside of defined contribution plans. And I think that's an important way to go, because one of the things to get at David's last point, you don't want to buy an annuity from an insurance company that's not going to be there when you need it. There are a lot of really good insurance companies out there, including some that I serve on the board of one and so forth that I have great confidence in, but there are also some out there that I wouldn't buy an annuity from. And that's a hard thing for an individual who doesn't have the training and so forth to sort through. So I think an important role of an employer in the context of say, a 401k plan is that an employer has more ability to do that kind of due diligence that's needed to ensure that that those annuities are going to be provided by a stable company that is taking an appropriate level of risk with their portfolio. But look, thinking about this as an income problem, not just a wealth problem. And then also taking into account some of the uncertainties that we all face, whether it's inflation, long-term care. Some of those require solutions that also involve forms of insurance. That's the recommendation I would give.
Well, if I can piggyback here, one, I think Jeff and I are in agreement that there ought to be an annuitization option at a minimum
Agreed.
with regard to individuals that are covered in defined contribution type plans when they want to start taking payments. Secondly, I would remind people that under the fiduciary rules of Title I of the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, and I used to run the Employee Benefit Security Administration as well, it's a fiduciary responsibility with regard to what options are you providing to individuals. And so therefore, I would suggest that, as Jeff said, employers are in a lot better position to try to evaluate these insurance companies. And if I was an employer, I would end up providing more than one option, but I would only provide options that met the fiduciary test. And that's why I come back to what I said before. Understand that rating agencies typically only look out 5 to 7 years. So you need to do more work than just rely upon what the rating agencies are. I like also his idea that it's a good idea to provide a stable form of income throughout your life. That's what annuities are all about. And I've done that myself. Let me just tell you one humorous thing. My dad, when he was 90 years old, and he passed at 91, unfortunately, so may God rest his soul. But I was handling his finances at that point in time. And he called me one day and he says, "Dave, I'm worried." I said, "Dad, what are you worried about?" He said, "I'm negative cash flow." Negative cash flow. I said, "What do you mean with negative cash flow?" I said, "Well, I know how much I get from my AT&T pension, and I know what the Social Security check is, and I know that what you're paying for this retirement community every month, and what you're paying is a little bit more than the two things that I'm getting." I said, "Dad, have you ever heard of retirement savings? Have you ever heard of investment income?" I said, "You're only negative cash flow with regard to those two things. Overall, you're fine."
So that is a great story. And can I say it illustrates something that is very common. And it's why I'm a believer in annuitization, a guaranteed lifetime income. It's because people have a very difficult time feeling comfortable spending down their wealth because they've spent their entire career being told that the thing they need to do is to build wealth and watch that account goes up. And it's psychologically a very difficult thing to switch that around and go, okay, now I'm supposed to be spending this down, but I don't want to spend it too fast. But then they end up spending too slow. And so there is research out there by David Blanchett, Michael Finke, that people refer to as permission to spend. That one of the nice things is when you have guaranteed income coming in each month, it allows you to have the confidence, in your case, your father's confidence, that, well, if he'd had some additional annuitization, some additional annuity income in there, he'd feel very differently about it. Now, we can all, as economists, whatever, we can debate about what's rational and what's not. The fact of the matter is, this is a very common way that people think about this problem. And that's why I think having more guaranteed income is a good thing. One of the policy complications here, and David will know this because of all his extensive experience, we have a bit of a tension right now, which is if a plan sponsor decides that they want to provide a guaranteed lifetime income option, they are held to those fiduciary standards. If they just wash their hands of it and say, that is not my problem, I'm just going to leave that burden on the individuals in my plan, the employer escapes their fiduciary obligation. And yet all that burden is placed on an individual who is not well equipped to deal with it. So we do need to make some policy changes there. to provide some kind of safe harbors for employers, whatever, in order to get them comfortable offering these kind of options.
With that, I'm going to bring in David Kinder. He's biting at the bit here. David is actually a registered financial consultant, and he actually is an advisor and a mentor to over 13,000 advisors. That's how I pick him up on the internet. And he may have something to say about annuities, because there's
just a little
big in the
bit.
financial services industry. There's one person who runs around yelling, "I hate annuities, and you should too." And now I'm listening to this panel, and they're saying maybe you shouldn't hate annuities. But hate or like, David, what are your thoughts? David.
All right, I got a lot of thoughts here, because number one, every 401k, when you look at rolling over, when you're a participant and you have retired, separated from service, if you look at that 402F disclosure form, one of those options is a lifetime annuity. Now, it is a very plain generic annuity, but it is an annuity. It is there as an option. Nobody chooses it, but it is there. Second part, if Social Security were to actually stop, which we all agree it's not going to end, if it were to stop, Social Security is the biggest legal Ponzi scheme. And I would encourage that Congress would have to actually repay all of its victims for the forced taxation and participation in the program to begin with. Now, we already have a form for that for victims of real Ponzi schemes. It's form 4684. All we need is a new form for that for every single one. And unfortunately, it would have to be up to each participant to figure out what all of our losses are so we could get it back from the federal government. So I have far more spicy views on all of this than what we've talked about so far. Now, the third part is that how do we save Social Security? How do we prepare for that? Here's the next step, because no one's talking about it. Actually, Tulsi Gabbard talked about it when she was in her brief run for president and on the debate stage. And she mentioned changing the age ranges for when you're able to claim benefits. And she was booed, which tells me a couple of things. It tells me the American people do not understand Social Security. That's the biggest issue that I see, because if the American people understood it, they would see, you know what? Maybe we need to put in some new changes in there so that it could be more solvent. But the other part would be to make it means tested. And no one's going to like that. Well, how do we make it means tested? And this is how Medicare is already done. The Medicare Income Related Monthly Adjustment Amount, IRMA, has a 2-year look back based on your tax return, based on whatever you reported as income, depends how much you pay for your Medicare. And it has, a graduating progressive amount. You pay more for the exact same service. Now, whenever I teach it, I talk about it like an oil change. If you have a Toyota Camry, you go to the dealer, and normally it's $100. Oh, we found out you have more money. You know what? We're going to charge you $500 for the exact same service. In capitalism, we would not tolerate that, but this is government, and apparently they get to write the rules. So the thing is that if it becomes means tested, how will they find out? Will they find out by your tax return? And this is the part that I have concerns about, and this is a more inflammatory opinion. A Roth IRA, while it does not affect anything in the tax return when it make a distribution, it is reported in there. So even if you have all your money in a Roth account, you still have to report that, which means that has now a way that government can determine, do you need your Social Security or not? And they will determine how much of your Social Security you get to have based on all of your other income. That's what I foresee being a potential possibility. How would I advise clients on that? Depending on how much they trust government, you could tell how much I trust government. I would be looking at wherever we can for collateral-based retirement. What's a collateral-based retirement? It's using your own assets and borrowing other people's money backed by your assets. And there's a few areas you could do that. Your home is certainly one. So primary mortgage, reverse mortgage, home equity. If you have a business, if you're keeping title of your business, you could borrow against the equity of your business, real estate, margin loans, cash value life insurance. And of all of those, as long as the cash value life insurance stays in force, that's the only one you don't have to, you do not have to ever repay back. In fact, there's no payment coupon book. So it all depends. Are there ways to do this? Yes. It all depends how much do you trust government, how much do you trust the spending that's going on. We know Donald Trump made a lot of promises about even abolishing the income tax. That was before we had a war. So you never know. Anyway, that's a lot of my spicy opinions there. Let's have at it.
Nick, let me jump in.
Sure.
We've jumped around a little bit. Again, coming back, there's really 3 components to retirement income security. There's Social Security, there's private pension plans, okay, and there's supplemental savings. Those supplemental savings can be through IRAs. They can, and in addition to that, they can be home equity. They can be, permanent life insurance. A number of things that can achieve that. But let me just tell you what I think is likely to happen with Social Security. I'll give you a little preview of one chapter of my forthcoming book. Okay, and what I'm going to convey here has received the support of 77% of representative groups of voters. All right. And so therefore the people are ahead of the politicians, because what the politicians don't tell them, among other things, is what happens if you do nothing, which is a 22 to 28% cut across the board. And in fact, the last two candidates for president said they weren't going to touch Social Security, but the journalists were too dumb or naive to ask the follow-up question, which is, that means you're for a 22 to 28% across the board cut. Sure, they would say no. Then the follow-up question to that is, what the hell are you going to do then? So let me give you a sense. All right. First, you won't cut anybody's current benefit. So whatever your whatever your accrued benefit is, you're not cutting. Okay. Secondly, you will maintain a defined benefit base. Some people want to convert it into a defined contribution type approach. That's not going to happen. Okay. Although I come back to say there ought to be a supplemental defined contribution type savings account on top of a reformed defined benefit program for people who do not have access to an employer-sponsored retirement plan. All right. Thirdly, you will significantly raise the payroll tax cap, as we did in 1983, but you won't eliminate it. Okay. You'll significantly raise it. Fourthly, you will avoid or try to minimize a payroll tax rate increase, because that's very regressive. And in fact, most individuals pay more in payroll taxes than they pay in income taxes. And in fact, about 20% of individuals that file tax returns not only don't pay any income taxes, they get a rebate, a refundable tax credit, because of EITC, childcare credits, etc. You gradually increase the normal retirement age 2 years over 24 years, 1 month a year over 24 years, but you don't change the early retirement age. And some consideration may have to be given to occupations that are heavily manual labor, that you may not be able to work as long. But a vast majority of the population are in white collar jobs, or even if they're in blue collar jobs, not ones that would not allow you to be able to work longer. And we know what the demographic trends are. You make the benefit formula more progressive. If you work a full 35 to 40 years, we're going to keep you out of poverty. All right. But we're not going to provide as much of a replacement rate for upper middle and upper income individuals. At the same point in time, we're not going to turn it into a welfare program saying that if you have a certain amount of income or assets and you paid into this for all these years, you're not going to get anything. That ain't going to happen. That turns it into a welfare program rather than a social insurance program. You adjust the COLA to make it more reflective of cost of living for seniors rather than the population as a whole. Once you start building up you also may have a cap on how much benefit you can have. This is the first year where individuals can have more than $50,000 in Social Security benefits, and couples can have more than $100,000. So that in addition to changing the formula, there'll probably be some type of cap that would be indexed to inflation, but some type of cap on the maximum benefit. Once we start building up trust fund assets again, allow more flexibility on investment of those trust fund assets beyond U.S. Treasury securities. It was always thought that U.S. Treasury securities were the safest investment in the world. I can debate that now, okay? But clearly you could achieve better rates of return with a more diversified portfolio with fiduciary responsibilities. And, I've already said, for those that don't have an employer-sponsored retirement plan, an automatic, I didn't use the word mandatory, but that's what it is, an automatic supplemental savings account, maybe 3% of pay on top, which may or may not be, involve some government matching or contributions to it. Those are, so it involves modifying the benefit eligibility and payment amounts. It involves additional revenues. It's a combination thereof. And it involves a supplemental account for people that don't have access to employer-sponsored program. That's illustrative. It's not exhaustive, okay? I mean, there are some inequities in the system that you need to work out as well, but that's more likely to be where we're headed.
So if I could jump in real quick, I'm going to have to jump off in just a minute. I just want to make a couple of big comments about what David just said. So first of all, you'll notice he put a lot of different proposals out there, which is great. It's going to take a lot of those individual pieces because the problem that we're trying to solve is large, right? This is, every now and then you'll hear somebody say, oh, we just need to raise the retirement age, or we just need to raise the cap on taxable earnings. It's going to take a bunch of those pieces all put together because the problem is large, all right? And David's proposal recognizes that. Every one of those policies he puts out there are within the realm of what I consider to be completely reasonable options that we need to consider. There are others out there. I won't necessarily endorse his particular one, but I'm not endorsing it. I'm just saying that that's the kind of thing we need. But back to your question, I'll make this my final point into the stuff that the other David was talking about. Like if I'm an advisor, what I'm telling people is, there's some uncertainty about how this is going to get resolved. So if it were me and I was dealing with a high income client, I'd probably take into account the fact that they shouldn't, it's not going to be zero. But if you look at their projected benefits and they're still, say, 10 years or more away from retirement, maybe you want to give that a haircut when doing your financial planning. I think people that are already retired are likely to be protected. I think people within 5 years of retirement are likely to be protected. I think somebody who's in their 40s and 30s and 20s right now, they should probably plan on those benefits being a little bit less generous than what is currently planned. And they're probably going to have to pay some more taxes going forward. And so as one is developing a financial plan for people, those are just parameters that I would consider. But the program's not going to go away. I don't call it a Ponzi scheme. I understand why people do call it a Ponzi scheme. I think it is what I call a pay-as-you-go Social Security system. It was designed explicitly that way. It's always been communicated explicitly that way. But because it's a pay-as-you-go system, you can't just get rid of it, because then you'd have to have all these people that are going, wait a minute, where are my benefits coming from? So with that, it's been a great discussion. I apologize that I had to jump off early.
I'm going to ask you, why don't you go? I can stay on another 5 minutes, and I got to go.
All right, I'll take a quick point. One is the contribution cap goes up just about every year. Back in 2018, it was 128. Now it's 184.5. It'll probably be 192 next year. You could have it jump up a little faster, which would help a little bit. That's thing one. Thing two is the way you beat an annuity, which includes Social Security, is you don't die. The longer you can get paid every month, the better you do. And which means you need regular medical checkups. Medicine is improving our lifespans, like at a really steady clip. And if you see your doctors, take the pills, do reasonable things to protect your health. And, Social Security is based on an average lifespan of 82. So try to live longer than 82 years.
Rick, let me say that when I talk about raising the taxable wage-based cap, you're right, it's indexed, and it'll be indexed after it's raised. It can be raised as much as double what it is now. Okay. It will not be eliminated, but it will be raised significantly.
Okay.
Let me just mention one other thing before I go, and you guys can continue. The question that I get asked all the time about Social Security is, when should I take Social Security? And David, that may be something you get asked. I can tell people what I did and why I did it, okay? But it's an individual decision. First, we've said Social Security is not going away, even though young people think it is, all right? And we're going to protect people that are in retirement or very close to retirement. So what does that mean? That means that we have the ability to exceed the expectation of every generation of Americans, because young people don't think they're going to get it. They're wrong. they're going to get it at a different age and maybe a different amount, but they're going to get it. All right. Seniors think they're going to get taken advantage of. I could use other words, but I won't. Okay. And so therefore everybody's going to get more than they think they're going to get. So we need to get on with it sooner rather than later. But what I tell people about when to take it is, are you healthy? Do you need it? And what is the history in your family with regard to life expectancy? If you're healthy and you don't need it, and you've got a pretty good history with regard to life expectancy, then take it as late as possible. If, on the other hand, you need it, okay, you're not in good health, or you're concerned about, heredity factors, okay, then you may want to take it early. But otherwise, take it as late as you can, because you get a higher benefit and it's indexed to inflation.
I think it goes up 7% a year for.
Yeah, it's about 7. Yeah.
So the one other question is, how's the overall economy doing? If the economy, if you think you can invest your money and make 12% a year on your money, then maybe you want to take your money a little early. But nobody's getting 12% right now.
Yeah, right. And most individuals aren't very good at that. So you guys continue. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. See you next week.
Also,
thank you, David.
If you're in a high tax bracket right now and you're going to be in a lower tax bracket in a few years, if you take it right now, you're going to get less per month and you're going to pay more of it out in taxes.
It's always a good question. David Kinder, you have some comments regarding this, because I know you meet with clients about that issue. It's got to come up all the time.
Well, the issue at this point, it becomes paying known taxes today versus unknown taxes tomorrow. What do we think the tax rates are really going to do? Unfortunately, I wish I could say I wish taxes can stay the same. I have no assurances of that. I see how we're spending. I see our national debt. There's a difference between tax policy and tax economics. Tax economics says we got to be paying a whole lot more money. Tax policy is saying who is going to be paying more money and when, and we don't really know that part yet. So as far as I agree with everything David Walker said about when to claim, it's about health and resources, and at the same time, there's, you got to do your calculation regarding what's the break-even point, right? If you take it at 62 versus waiting to 70. And if you're full retirement, for me, full retirement age would be 67. The longer you wait until the maximum claim age, which is 70, it's an 8% per year increase of that paycheck. It's actually 0.5%. That's something I've memorized a long time ago, and it won't leave my head. 0.5% per month. So go figure. Now, as far as claiming it, all those factors: health, resources, and one of the things that we've been trained as financial advisors, help people create an income bridge from where you are now, so you can delay that Social Security, so you can get that maximum paycheck. The other part is if you're married. Now, there's a couple of parts about being married. The first part is if you were married for at least 10 years before a divorce, you can claim a benefit based on your spouse's earning record. But the other part is that you've got to plan not just for yourself, you got to plan for your surviving spouse. Usually the men die first. And so the spouse will get the larger of the two benefits, not both. And so I would recommend at any time, if you can delay. And it's not because of you, it's because your surviving spouse. And usually the old folks home, full of a lot older mothers, not a whole lot of older fathers. So we got to look out for our spouses for that. Okay, those are my thoughts real quick.
One more thing nobody ever talks about, which is how nice do you want to be to 90-year-old you? Like I've had relatives who were 90 who wouldn't know the difference between staying in a fancy joint that's $12,000 a month and a crappy joint that's $6,000 a month.
Right. Okay. Yeah. In other words, the quality of life, as one person said, you have, when you retire, you have go, slow go, and then no go. Okay. I think it was Tom Hegna. It was pretty funny. Yep. But I think he's right. When you retire, go. Then all of a sudden, slow go. And then when you hit your 90s, no go. But David, he did mention something very interesting on insurance companies, which I found interesting. All insurance companies are not the same. What are your thoughts on that? Are all these insurance companies that offer annuities, on all the annuities the same, or do you see differences in the marketplace? What's your thoughts?
Well, there's a whole lot of talk regarding reinsurance, especially offshore reinsurance. And a lot of companies are doing this because they can shore up their balance sheet, free up more capital so they can invest and supplement their general investment account. I like the principle, but I hate how they're doing it. And so I don't fault an insurance company trying to chase profit because they need to get as much revenue in order to supplement dividends, in order to continue paying benefits. This is the fun part where, see, most people hate insurance companies until they realize the more profitable the insurance company is, the better off they are to be able to actually pay the benefits they promised to pay. That's assuming they're paying the benefits. Now, we're talking about life insurance and annuity companies. We want them to be profitable. When we're talking about health insurance, it's a whole nother conversation, and that's a whole nother consumer sentiment there. So we need companies to be profitable so they can pay out the promised benefits. Do we all know how to evaluate those companies? And I'm going to say probably not. I don't always know. I try to keep my ear to the tempo of things that are going on. But the main thing I look for is the ratings. And even then, are the ratings incorporating all of these offshore things? And they're probably not. So I look for primarily what are the guarantees of the annuity? What is it that I'm sure to get? What is the annuity guaranteed to do? What might it do? And especially for annuities, because those are the ones that were primarily for lifetime retirement income. So I'm always looking for what are the contractual promises and guarantees, and then whatever's nice, that's nice. I don't count on that. So
isn't another problem that insurance brokers work on commission?
Oh, we want to bring that up. Okay, David Walker brought up something regarding fiduciary duty and Title I, ERISA, and all that other stuff. Now, here's the problem that I have. Not against fiduciary, but what fiduciary stands for. Fiduciary includes best interest, which means looking, you got to gather all the information and how people feel about their financial situation to make appropriate recommendations. To me, that's being a proper human being. You don't need a fiduciary duty to treat people right. But fiduciary duty is about standard of care that's defined by sources of compensation. If I get any source of compensation aside from the client, and I'm holding myself out as a fiduciary, and I've written a white paper about all this stuff, I have to not only disclose, I have to get the client's consent. But you could be a fiduciary in anything. I could be a fiduciary car mechanic, and if I happen to be promoting one brand of motor oil instead of another, I have to disclose that because they're paying me to sell them, right? So fiduciary duty is not all-encompassing. It sounds like it's comprehensive planning. It's not. It's fiduciary duty within one's licensing and your profession. It does not include everything under the sun. If it did, I mean, we had a conversation on LinkedIn once. Someone said, David, if you have two different policies, one you're licensed to sell, the one you're not licensed to sell, similar guarantees, but the one you're not licensed to sell is $10,000 a year cheaper. Aren't you under a fiduciary duty to sell that one? I said, if I don't know about it because it's not in my licensing, how would I be under a fiduciary duty and be liable for it? Because I'm not liable to sell what I can't offer. So fiduciary duty is all within one scope of licensing, one scope of professional responsibility. So when we're talking about 401k plans, unless Fidelity has their own. Now, Fidelity has co-branded annuities. They've sponsored some, but unless they've created their own, they don't have a fiduciary duty to put annuities in their 401k plans. Now, does the advisor? Depends on how they're licensed. And even then, I'm still kind of against the idea of putting retail commercial annuities in 401ks. I like that it's becoming more accessible. I like that the law allows it, but who's going to make those choices? And do you want the employer to make those choices? The employer can't even choose the 401k plan investment choices. If you look at a Fidelity plan, how many investment choices are there? 50? I'm sorry, the employer isn't good at this. The fiduciary advisor is putting the plan together is trying to cover their fiduciary duty by saying, here, just do it all. And then we have some model portfolios based on your risk tolerance. Fiduciary duty has become an F word, and I'll leave it at that.
That's an interesting perspective. Okay, what about there's a guy that runs around saying, because I just heard David Walker, Jeff Brown say, well, you should have annuities, in other words, a lifetime income. And there was a study done. If you have an annuity, you live longer, which is really weird. And at least they're doing studies that people's life expectancies increase by having an annuity, probably because they have more, what they call it, financial security. But there's a guy who runs around saying you should hate annuities. What are your thoughts on that? When I just heard Jeff Brown, who I respect, the former dean of the University of Illinois business school and Dave Walker say that should be an option for everybody. So what are your thoughts between
My
him
thoughts
and
are
the
look
gentleman?
at, you got to look at the business model behind the advice. And unfortunately, we have to do that. And that's what I end up doing. I have to look at the business model behind the advice and do they acknowledge their own biases? Fisher Investments, we're calling them out because it's him who keeps saying that commercial. I hate annuities and you should too. Well, if you look at them, they don't sell annuities. They're not fiduciary licensed to sell them. That's actually not a thing. They don't have an insurance license. So they get to say that because they're being a fiduciary duty of the investment management choices that they make available on their platform. They can say anything else they want, but they're not offering annuities because they don't make it part of the business model. Now, there's many different business models. I am currently insurance only, which means I offer life insurance, I offer annuities. Now, can I also offer investment management? My CHFC designation would allow me to either form or join an investment advisory firm, and I could offer that service. When you look at someone who's fee only, they can only get compensation from the client, which means that they don't offer the things that offer commissions, regardless of how good or bad that they are. They can't do it because they have to sacrifice their fee only label in their marketing. So that's their business model. To me, I think that the most open-minded business model is someone who's fee-based. They receive fees. Either they charge a fee by the consultant or by the client, or they receive portfolio management fees. They can also offer insurance and other. They can have the whole gamut of whatever they're licensed to do to create the optimal situation for the client. To me, I think that's the most open-minded professional you can work with. But whenever someone has such an absolute, I have to ask more questions. And unfortunately, people take absolutes. A lie can be told in one sentence. The truth takes an entire chapter. And that's why my blog has over 200 articles, because I have to explain some of this garbage that sometimes gets perpetuated out there.
I would guess that people who floss their teeth live longer than people who don't. And it might be similar with annuities that, so sometimes in annuities, your best choice, sometimes it's not, but it puts you in the area of being a responsible person. Somebody who's an alcoholic or a gambling addict probably has so much chaos in their life that they never get around to looking at annuities. My wife is so responsible, and she makes us look at annuities every couple of years. I'm like, oh no, we're already annuity, but no, we have to look again because she's somebody who still sends thank you notes and stuff.
Yeah, the other thing that I found very interesting on the annuities, and I wrote an article for the Journal of Accountancy a long time ago on this particular issue, and I was shocked that the CPAs didn't know this, because the Journal of Accountancy is read nationwide by all the CPAs. It's their national journal. And here's the interesting fact. No commissions are taken out of fixed or equity index annuities. So I said we use them a lot in pensions because, quote, no commissions are taken out. Well, at the national office in Tennessee, they were going, oh, this can't be true. I said, yeah, it is true. And so they do a peer review on your article. And I said, go ahead and talk to the insurance commissioners. I gave them their names. I gave them the heads of insurance companies. They came back and said, oh, you're right. There's no commissions taken out on fixed or equity index annuities. What shocked me is this is the national group of CPAs not knowing it. Then how do they pay their producers? They have what they call a deferred acquisition charge. It's similar if you went to a bank and you have a teller who's writing up a CD, because I bought CDs at banks. I bought annuities from insurance companies. I don't pay the teller a commission, but the bank will pay the teller, and the insurance company will pay David, but nothing is taken out of your account. And so I think a lot of people don't know that, but you have to be very careful. There's different annuities. There's the fixed equity index. Those are the ones I'm talking about. You go to a variable annuity, there are commissions taken out. So it's kind of funny. You're in one side of the house.
Fun with that.
And then the other side of the house, it's not so simple. Yeah, David.
Okay. So with the fixed and the fixed index annuities, they are spread products, which basically means the insurance company pays a producer, and they recoup it the longer that the investment stays in force. So they've got to keep the money on the books, and they make a percentage on the difference of however the performance works. And so that's why the commissions are paid by the insurance company, not out of the product. Now, variable annuities work the exact same way. The difference is that the variable annuities, they have certain costs that are built in. And I look at it like this. We talk about CDs. Let's talk about CDs and mutual funds. CDs are fixed interest investments. They're not securities, but they're fixed interest places so you can put your capital. And the bank does not give you a prospectus that says, here's everything that we use to calculate how much the rate's going to be. They don't have to do that because it's a fixed rate given the amount of time. However, if you put your money into a money market mutual fund, they have to give you a prospectus. Even though it's rarely that the fund will ever break the buck, that's the term, where your shares go below $1 per share of value, they still have to tell you what the expenses are. With the variable annuity, it's like that. You have to get a prospectus, literally. It's sold by prospectus, and you have your mortality expense charge. Well, what's that charge? That charge is to allow you to turn the whole thing into a lifetime annuity, and you don't get to manage the investment anymore. It is whatever it is. Then you have your mutual fund charges, because there's mutual funds in that account, and then there's optional charges for lifetime income riders, optional death benefit enhancement. There's all kinds of things that can be chosen in most variable annuities. Those costs range to about 3 to maybe 4%, depending on what's chosen, especially the investment options within it. So it's they don't take the commission out. They still pay the commission out of the insurance company's marketing budget, but it still has more fees. The question is, are the fees worth it? And like everything, it depends. And I should actually retitle my podcast to say it depends, because everything depends. So I never try to make unilateral things like you should never. I am not a Sith Lord. I don't use absolutes. The question is never, always, sometimes. Let's find out. Let's ask the question. Let's know enough about each situation and figure out, does this make sense for you or not? That's where I'm at. So nothing.
Oh, David, I never use absolutes. David, I never use absolutes.
That also in couples counseling, that's a rule. You can't use absolute. You can't sit there in couples counseling and say, you never, you always. A good counselor will say, no.
Yeah, but David Walker also brought something very interesting, thing that all insurance companies are not the same. In my experience, that is absolutely correct. And one problem that we're seeing in the United States is private equity, and they've invaded the insurance market. And it seems to me private equity is driven because, remember, there are mutual companies, which basically, if you own a policy, you're a shareholder in the company. It's a weird thing. Then there's stock companies. You own the policy, but the company's owned by stockholders. And then now there's the new thing, new kid in town called private equity. And my meeting with private equity owners, they're driven by one thing: bottom line profits for them. What do you think about insurance companies owned by private equity? I can tell you my thoughts are real simple. I won't work with them. I just won't. The minute I see a private equity ownership, I'm out. As tell the client, we're not going to work with them. But now I'm going to throw the hot potato to you, David. What is your thoughts about private equity owning insurance companies?
If they do it as a startup and they're upfront about it, at least they'll be upfront about it. One of the things that I went through a demutualization of a company not too long ago. There's a company that apparently was in trouble that hit it reasonably well, I suppose, but they tried to sell themselves 7 times to other companies and they could not get a buyer to buy them out. So what happened is that there's a couple of pension funds out of Canada and they bought out this company. Now it is owned by this company. And here's what happened to the existing policyholders of that company. They reinvented what it meant to get a dividend. Their dividend scale is practically zero. Unless you're paying a premium that year, you're not getting a dividend, which means for their limited pay policies, you did a 10-pay policy. In year 11, you're expected to get an increasing dividend. No, it's sunk. It's sunk by 95% of their original estimates. So if they're a startup, that's one thing. And even then, I don't want to touch them. But if they're taking over an existing company, I hope you're healthy, because the healthy people get to move out. They get to transfer their policy values to something else, to another company. If you're not healthy, you're kind of stuck. And that's what we call adverse selection. And with adverse selection, that can tank a company because all the sick people stay. And when all the sick people stay and the policies are enforced, they've got to pay out at some point, and they're probably going to pay out sooner than later. I mean, the old joke is you pay more, we pay quicker.
What about changing conditions, demographic and otherwise? We've seen the collapse of the home insurance markets in California and Florida because of fires and big storms. What happens with life insurance when AI changes how long we live?
I don't know how AI will change how long we live, but
Well, it brings us new medicine, so people.
Yeah.
People.
In other words, what they call a longevity crisis, which is quite possible.
Well, we'll probably
People
do
live
for
longer.
new.
Now
We'll
what?
probably do for new CSO mortality tables. I think the last ones were 2017. So those get updated periodically. And this is one reason why some of the older insurance companies have to come out with new product, because they have to align the product to the current mortality table. So they'll do that, and they still do that every 5 to 10 years, whatever the interval is. If you want to talk about the insurance market here in California, I did interview who was running for commissioner, Stacy Corksenden. I know I butchered her name, unfortunately, but we did talk about that, making sure that companies can stay in California, why California isn't a more robust insurance economy, because California makes it so much more difficult to do business in. I said, we got so much opportunity here. We should be the largest insurance market in the world, and yet we're not. And there's so much opportunity. And of course, part of that is managing our own risks here in California. So that was a whole nother thing. If you happen to go on my YouTube channel, just search up my name, David Kinder. You'll find that. That was one of my recent ones I did about a couple months ago. Unfortunately, she didn't make it. But
the other thing is, what about the state insurance guarantee funds? It looks like every state in the United States has a guarantee fund, similar to FDIC insurance. If you have money in a bank, you also have insurance by the states for insurance companies. What are your thoughts on that? California, in my review, has the weakest. I know you two guys are in California.
Yeah, no, we had to look at it, and it's not good.
The weakest state insurance guarantee fund. The strongest is in New York, then Washington State, and California is at the bottom. What about beefing up the California State Insurance Guarantee Fund? David?
Yeah, you put that on me. I didn't talk about that with Stacy, and I really ignore that mostly because, quite frankly, I trust insurance companies more than the state guarantee funds. And for an insurance agent, you're not allowed to talk about that. And
I know that's one of the weird things. What you just said. This is one of the weird things in the law. What David just said. Now think about it. Here you have a state insurance guarantee fund, similar to FDIC, but it's by the state. But insurance agents are not allowed to discuss it with you. Now, think about it. It's
not allowed to be a sales point. I cannot use it to be a sales point. Now, I could disclose if someone says, what happens if all the insurance companies fail? Well, if the insurance companies fail and your policy is domiciled for California, then the California state guarantee comes into play within limits. And that's pretty much how we're allowed to talk about it. That's it. You cannot say, oh, this is so totally safe because if it fails, then you still have the. No, you cannot be a sales point, and because that can be seen as an inducement to buy and such, and your E&O will not cover you. So anybody that's talking about that as a sales point, no. I do have a thing on my website. I've got a one-page thing on it. It's very safe for me to use, but I do not use it as a sales point. I don't even bring it up.
If you want to talk about terrible California coverage, earthquake insurance with a 15% deductible, you're paying a couple grand a year betting that an earthquake will cause more than $250,000 to your home because the first $250,000 can be on you. It's a terrible bet.
Okay, and the other thing that you just brought up is living longer. Now, this is a real problem in annuities because depending on the pricing, they need people to die. By the way, it's the same thing in Social Security. Because when you die, then they stop the payments unless you have a spouse, and they collect all the money that they had set aside for you. But it helps out on the life insurance. So, David, would you say that if we do have a mortality increase, which is quite possible over the next 10 years with these new medical breakthroughs right now in cancer, heart disease, et cetera, and then you have normally right now in the United States, it's like age 78. In Spain, where I live, it's like 84. But let's say it becomes 90 and 94. Now, all of a sudden, do insurance companies experience a mortality gain on the life side, but a mortality loss on the annuity side. What are your thoughts?
It's always a give and take regarding life insurance and annuities. When one increases, the other one decreases, it all matches out at that point. But the thing is, people still die. Yes, we have an increasing longevity overall, but I still see the headlines. Someone passed away at 36 due to heart disease or something. So there are people that are still passing away. But the thing is that, I mean, what is it? Is 50 the new 30? And I'm hoping for that because I'm 18 months away from being 50. So, and if you're looking at statistics, if you're married, you're statistically gonna live longer, probably because your spouse makes sure you go to the doctor. So there's a lot of things that can work in your favor, but we have to take personal responsibility. I do see my doctor more regularly than I would care to admit, but I do. But we have to take personal charge on that. Now, if we ignore it, anything can happen. But people are living longer and people are aging better than ever before. So, you know, I mean, we used to look at 60 and say you're near the grave. Now 60, you've got another 40 years of life ahead of you.
David, that's why I thought 60 was the new 30.
Sorry.
And I thought you were the new 20.
So I want to survive long enough, 30 years, to have to go to court and prove that my body, which is now 80% robot, is still me and I still deserve my annuity. You know, 60% of my brain has been replaced with biocircuitry. My heart is like some mechanical pump. Everything is replaced and I have to prove I'm still a person.
As long as it's not a medically underwritten annuity, you should be fine.
Yeah, but the thing is, it will pose a big problem in the next several years. And the problem that Social Security has, of course, it is a pay-go system. It's never actually designed soundly, which means you need to bring more workers in the door, which we haven't done, or have more babies working, which we haven't done. And so now you have to revamp the system, or you're going to have to open the floodgates to foreign workers coming in here to support the old people that are retiring. And in either case,
the immigration debate regarding illegal immigration. That's what they were, let's call it the political left was saying this is going to help with that. Well, it depends if they're paying into the system, but there's other social costs with that as well. So like everything, it depends.
Yeah, that's the reason you have a JD degree. Your JD just depends degree.
Our fertility is an all-time, and also population growth, all-time lows. Population growth is like 0.25%. We're only making 80% as many babies as we need to replace the population. And if you're around young people, I see people at the gym, and I can see why people aren't getting laid and making babies. Everybody is on their freaking phone. They're streaming all the time, which is bad. Like I was forced to go out and try to get a girlfriend. I couldn't just be entertained because we didn't have phones yet.
No, but we had Pac-Man and we had other video games.
Well, I'd still say it's about money more so than streaming.
Well, that too.
Because it is a cost to have a child. As you see, I have one right here. So it's an extreme expense to have a child. So thinking about most young people now, there are distractions, but a lot of issues with young people now is they see the financial problems that they would get into. So childbearing and pregnancy and all this other stuff, that's why we're having a lot of the problems. It's mainly due to the economics of it and not due to the extra distractions.
Yeah. If you've got two roommates in a 400 square foot studio apartment and you've hung sheets up to make fake little bedrooms, you're not going to get a girl in there to even try to make a baby.
No, but we're going to try to get out of here because we're at the time. But we do want to thank our special guest, David Kinder, and his 13,000 financial advisors, and plus our viewers in the United States and around the world. We'll see you next time on Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. Take care. Bye-bye.